COVID-19 has had an impact on the country's economy. For the ensuing budget, the government would be keen to pay attention to the growth of the economy. Of course, macroeconomic stability would also be on their mind. Government has, during the year, introduced many programs and interventions for the vulnerable society as well as for the industry. But then, the upcoming budget would need to be at a higher level, would need to create jobs and livelihood, would need to have growth on the agenda. Infrastructure, for that matter, is a good candidate for attention. Government presently spends almost like central as well as the state together, spends almost like 78% on the infrastructure spend of the whatever the total. Private sector does only 22%. It will be imperative that private sector involvement in the infrastructure development is certainly moved up. It will be important to also look at all these 7,000 projects together, which are in the pipeline as per the National Infrastructure Pipeline, with an investment opportunity of almost like 110 lakh crores. The government should set up a infrastructure board on the same line as Norway has done, Chile has done, and Korea, for monitoring these infrastructure projects, for identifying these infrastructure projects, implementing these infrastructure projects, so that the right gain can come out of that. Typically, world over, the studies say that 1/3 of the resources on these investments go waste. The idea is, how do I reduce it in the Indian context? It will be also important, and this is very, very urgent actually, that health infrastructure, which has so far, the government spending has been about 1.1 to 1.2% of the GDP, is moved up to higher number. Of course, the government cannot take it to a much higher number, because this has to be incremental, because the other expenditure items, be it the subsidy or the interest or the defense budget, are of course are almost like committed expenditure. But then the government will have to find resources to put money on the health infrastructure, because that is really a crying need. And COVID has brought that attention quite starkly. I'm also looking at the tax collections, because the tax collections during the present year, have not been very great. Indirect taxes in the last 2-3 months have picked up because of the consumer demand picking up. To sustain that in the next financial year, to also make sure that the direct tax collections are good enough to balance the budget, will be an uphill task. Because my sense is that the direct tax collection this year is going to be reduced by almost like 10%. And the next year could be almost the same story, given that many companies may have got losses in the current year, which will be offset with the profit if they make in the subsequent year. So in that respect, the resource mobilization through disinvestment becomes that much important. Disinvestment, for some reason, has not been on a very sure-footed manner. It will be important for the government to lay out a roadmap on disinvestment and make sure that whichever companies are put up for disinvestment are actually done during the financial year, so that the budgetary pressure of their not being done is mitigated to a large extent. So I'm really looking towards growth and macroeconomic stability. Let me also address two important points. One is on the how some of the sectors would get the slashed budget allocation. During the current year itself, there have been ministries whose allocation was slashed by some percentage. I would expect that if the government thinks that that much money which got allocated during the current budget is not required, they may slash or have a reduced budget allocation for them. It's important for the government to get some fiscal space, because if the tax collections are muted and the fiscal space is not there, the budget is not going to be very, very balanced, and the fiscal deficit would rise, which would be highly undesirable. For the common man, which many of them lost jobs, the government would want to bring certain things. They already have something for the rural jobs. They need to create a similar one on almost the same lines for the urban jobless poor. And that will be important. Even for the middle class, they need to put some more money in their pocket for them to invest in the housing or undertake education for their children. And for that matter, to bring or enhance the interest on borrowed capital will be definitely a good idea.